Welcome to Improve Your English Writing, video number 70, which is the second part in a two-part series on writing footnotes with the Chicago manual style. So this video is specifically going to cover the 4 parts of writing a source citation and writing a bibliography. If you like to get notifications to this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video or you think others will find it useful, which is a critical component, maybe you find it beneficial and you see others will find it beneficial, please hit like and check out links to videos and books in the description, like a link to the companion volume here. So let's talk about the 4 parts of a source citation. So this video is only going to cover source citation for the 4 most common types of sources. That is a book, a journal, a magazine, and a web page. The book also covers a book chapter, a lecture, presentation, and audiovisual sources like a film, DVD, album, and so on. But this video is going to cover the 4 most common ones: book, journal, magazine, and web page. So, what are the 4 things needed to create a source citation? First thing is the author's name. So we're talking first, middle, last, or whatever you get. Maybe it's just the first and middle initial and last, but you have the author's name. The work title, the full work title, the publication date, and I'm going to call it the other publication details. So the necessary publication details, the last bullet here, those publication details depend on the source type. Is it a book? Is it a magazine? Those differ, but everything will always have an author's name, work title, and publication date. But other things for the source citation will depend on the source type. So what you want to do is you want to record all the publication details that apply to the source type. And I'm going to go through like I said, I'm covering 4 types, so I'm going to go through those 4 types. I decided to start with web page first, just because it fits on this slide. So for web page, I'm just going to repeat it here, just to drive the point home that, while all these bullet points are regarding the publication details, we always want to be recording the author's name, work title, publication date. But the publication details specific to the web page are the website name, the URL, it's a website, so it's a URL, and the access date, because you should have a publication date. So remember, in one of the videos I said if it doesn't have a publication date, always write the access date. So even though it has a publication date, always record your access date. So those are the publication details for a web page. What about a book? Well, once again, we're always recording the author's name, work title, and publication date. But the publication details that can be applicable to a book are the publisher, the city of publication, which is more important for older sources, like published probably before 1900, than more modern books. Editor, if it has one. A translator, if it has one. Edition number, if it has one. It may not have one. Remember, these are all the publication details that are applicable. So if you don't have an editor or translator, you don't record it. But these are things that could be applicable to the publication details for your source citation. So edition number, a volume number, because sometimes you can have like an encyclopedia. You can have a volume 1 and volume 2. So then you have the page numbers, which is probably one of the more common types of publication details. You can have a repository location. This is you want to record the repository location for hard to find, or maybe these are things that are not easily accessible. So maybe it's a rare book or a rare magazine. Well, I guess we're talking about books. This could be a rare book that's in a certain library. So you want to put the what library it's in. Maybe it's in the Chicago Library or the New York Public Library. And then maybe you want to put the call number if it has a call number. That way what you're trying to do is make it easy for someone to come through and repeat your research. So if it's in a certain call number in a library, record the call number. Or if it's in a box number or a file number or something like that. So this is called the repository information, but it's only included for limited access or references or sources. And then you want to record the DOI or the URL if you accessed it online. What about for a journal and magazine? These are basically the same, if you don't know, or they have the same types of data. Once again, you're always recording the author's name, work title, and publication date, but the specific publication details that apply to a journal or magazine are the journal or magazine name, the volume number, the issue number, the page numbers, repository information. I just discussed that with books. If it's applicable, remember these are always if they're applicable. And a DOI or URL if there is one. So that's that's it for, we covered a website, book, and journal or magazine. So let's talk about a source citation what happens when there's two authors, because I talked about recording the author's name. So what happens when you have two authors? Well, if you had I'm just going to put them all here. But this is how you would record it for a full citation, a short citation, and in the bibliography. Notice in the full citation you put, John Smith. So basically first name first, or maybe you say, last name last or whatever. But it comes in. I'm going to call it the natural order. John Smith and Robert Jones. This is how you would record if you had two authors. And then in a short citation, you just record the last names. Remember, if you go back to that, I think it was the last video where we talked about a short citation only records the author's last names. And in the bibliography, because things are listed by, authors' names, well, it's always by author's last name. So what you do is you have to switch this. Instead of saying John Smith, you say Smith, John, and Robert Jones. So when you have two authors, this is how you would list them in the source citation if you have two authors. What happens when you have three authors? Well, this is what you do. It's full is John Smith, Robert Jones, and Emma Williams. So you just put the first and last names, or if they had middle initials, you would put the middle initials. You just list the authors, just so basically like if you have a series of items. If you really think about it, the full one is just like if you had a series of items. Remember, the short citation is just the last names. And in the bibliography, once again, you start with the author's last name, Smith, Jones. Then, Smith, John, Robert Jones, and Emma Williams. So this is how you list three authors. Then if you had four or more authors, this is how you list it. What you do is you say John Smith et al., meaning there's others, and you do the short citation the same way. And the bibliography, you list all the authors. So if you had 20 authors, you list 20 authors, and you use the pattern just like works with three or more authors. So you just write, Smith, Jones, Robert Smith, Emma Williams, Emma Williams, blank, comma, and then, right before the last one, you put and. So you use this pattern right here so when you have four or more, you list all the authors and use the pattern like in three or more authors. So, because all my source citations or all my examples are just going to list one author. So the reason I go over this slide is that when you have two or three authors, you need to put it in this format, in one of these formats. That's why I go over this slide first, because I'm not going to have an example that has two authors in it. So let's remember, I'm only going to cover a book, journal, magazine, and website. So let's actually cover doing a source citation for a book. So I'm going to just list it out. it's all color coded in the examples. That way, it's easier to reference. But of course, if you don't know, there's only about 4 or 5 good colors doing this presentation, so I have to repeat some. So the author's name will be in red and the work title in blue, etc., etc. Then we have the city of publishing and the publisher. So what you want to do is that the city of publishing and publisher, you separate these occur together, and they're separated with a colon. So you have the year, you'll have pages. Remember, these were different. If you remember a couple slides ago, these were all the various, the the author and the work title were, not part of these were the items you needed, but weren't part of what I call the publication details. So, but the book, just covering more year, pages, you have the DOI URL. These are the most common. And then I have other as this orange color, like editor, translator, edition. So it's all color coded. So let's go over the 3 examples. So this is basically, I do the same source citation in 3 different formats. I do it in a full format, I do it in a short format, and I do it in a bibliography format. So let's say you had this work here by Martin Smith, Essential Grammar, published 2001, page 110. So how you do this in a full citation is you list the author with first name first, and then you do a comma. So you separate one of the previous slides that says you take all the various elements and you separate them with commas. So you do the author, comma, then you do the work title, and this is the title of a book. So if you go back to one of those rules on style, you put the title of a book in italics. So here's the title of the work. You put it in italics, comma. In this case, what comes next is, now I only put it in editor, editor right here. But actually, if you had an edition or a translator, it would actually go right in this slot right here. So it could be editor, it could be translator, it could be 3rd edition right here. But you would put comma, then you put this one of these 3 types of other information or publication details right here. Then you put the city of publication and the publisher in parentheses. So parentheses, Chicago, so it's published in Chicago. And remember, it says you separate the city of publication and the publisher with a colon. So it's the city of publication, colon, Random House, and then comma. Then you put the year of publication. Then you end it with parentheses, comma, the page number, comma, and then you put the DOI or URL. And here, this is the DOI. So this is how you would format or this is the source citation for a book. This is the order that they occur in. It's all color coded so you can see it. Now the short citation, you just put the author's last name, the work title, shortened work title, but in this case it's only 2 words, so you might as well put the full title. And then you put the page number, any applicable page number. So this is what the shortened citation would look like. Remember, this shortened citation is just enough to point you to the bibliography, which is the 3rd example here. So notice, or I think I said in a different video, that notice how the full citation and the bibliography are very similar. The main 2 differences are the information, the publication details, or even the titles and things like that, are all separated with periods. And the other big difference is the instead of first name first, the first name comes last, because in a bibliography you order everything by author's last name. So in a bibliography it's Smith, comma, Martin, then period, not comma, Essential Grammar, period, edited by Allison Jones. Well, here you did an abbreviation. Here you actually spell it out, edited by. If this was translator, it's a translated by. Then instead of using enclosing the city of publication and the publisher and the year all in parentheses, there are no parentheses. You just put period. Then you put the city of publication, the publisher, comma. Remember, these are separated. city of publication, and the publisher are separated with a colon, and then comma, the year, period, whoop, and then you put the, in this case, it's the DOI or the URL. This is a DOI, and then you put the period, and then you put the DOI. This is how this would be how you'd format a bibliography entry for a book. So this is the information you need, and this is the order that it appears in with the various punctuation. So that's it for a book. Let's move on to a did it back up? Oh, whoops. How interesting. This should have read journal or magazine. Sorry. So let's back up. That's a mistake in the video. So this is, this is me copying and pasting. Sorry. So this should read journal or magazine here. So you have the author's name, you have the work title, and you enclose the work title for a journal or magazine, not a book, in quotation marks. Then you have the name of the journal or magazine in italics. If you go back to the rules of style for titles of journals or magazines are in italics, and we close the works of journal articles in quotation marks, so that's why you enclose the titles in quotation marks. You have the volume number, you have the issue number, you have the publication date, which is enclosed in parentheses. You have the page number, which is always preceded by a colon. And then you have the DOI or URL. So let's look at 3 examples like we did last time and go over these. So for the full citation, I did cover a lot of things in the book that I may not repeat, but you have the author's name, first name first, comma, then you have the title of the work in quotation marks. Remember, it's comma because we separate all the elements by commas in a full citation. Then you have the name of the journal or magazine, and you italicize that because that's you need to italicize titles of books, of journals or magazines. Then you have the volume number. This is color-coded. You have the volume number, comma, and then you have the issue number. So you have NO for number. So number 2. This is basically volume 5, number 2. That's what this is saying. Grammar Quarterly, volume 5, issue 2. That's how you format this. And then you put in parentheses, you put the publication date. In this case, usually magazines are not published on a certain day. They're usually a month and a year. So that's why you have March 2005. This makes it easier because some people, they may be able to look it up by volume number and issue, but some people, if you tell them it's March 2005, they can go straight to a website and find that one instead of looking up the volume and the number. So to me, that's why you put both. Then you have page 7 because you're saying the information is on page 7, and then you have the here is the URL for that. If this was in a book or something, you may be able to, if this is the long URL, you may have to break this at like one of the slashes here. So that's a full citation. For the short citation, remember it's always just the author's last name. It's it's a shortened work title and any applicable page number. So here, the exclamation mark was abbreviated to exclamation mark 7. And then for the bibliography, you can once again see that the format for the full citation and bibliography are very similar, except for one uses commas to separate elements, the other one uses periods. That's almost it. The only other difference is, you have the author's name, title, a magazine, the volume number, the issue number, the date. But here's the full range. So here, the full citation, you're actually referencing the page number that the information appears on. And just like the shortened citation, Here's the number of the information that you're specifically referring to is on page 7. But when you have the bibliography, you're going to list the full range, or the article appears on multiple pages, so 5 through 8. Because what happens is that when you have the bibliography, you're pointing to the specific page number, but in the bibliography you want to say this article actually appears on pages 5 through 8 in this magazine. So you put the full range. That's probably one of the key differences, is that for a journal or magazine, you put the full range, the full page number range of the article, and then you have the URL here. So that's how you format not a book, it's a journal or magazine. Sorry about that. Hopefully I didn't make that mistake on the next slide. Good, I did not. So website. So here's the various information for a website. So you have the, remember, all color coded. Author's name, work title, website name, which you put in italics. So if you go back to that rule, once again, one of the things you put in italics is a website name. Oh, and I forgot to say the work title. So website page is always enclosed in quotation marks, but the title of the website is italicized. This isn't some rule that Chicago Manual's made up, but these elements are actually, this is how, if you go back to the style rules, this is how you're supposed to do them. So even if you weren't doing a source citation, if you were ever referencing a web page, you would put it in quotes. If you were ever referencing a website, you would put it in italics. So you're just following the standards of style in the source citation. So the publication date, and there's sort of three cases. You can have it the actual published date. You'll have it published, and since web pages are updated, sometimes they'll actually say, won't have it published, but will say like updated. So you want to say updated, or if it doesn't have a published publication date, you put accessed, and then you put the website would have a URL, not a DOI. So let's look at the full, the short, and the bibliography. So once again, these are all color-coded, so you can go through them, but basically you have the author's name. Remember, in a full citation, all the elements are separated with with commas. So the author's name, you have the work title in enclosed in quotes. You have the website in italics. Then you have published on this date, and you follow, it's just July 21st, 2020. So, but this could say, maybe this would say updated. So if the article is updated, if it had no publication date, you'd use the word accessed right here. And then you put comma, and then you put the actual URL right here, and you end it with a period. So that's a full citation. A short citation, remember, is just always author's last name, short work title and page number. Of course, there's no page numbers on a website, so it's just ever always going to be author's last name and shortened work title. In this case, the work title is it's only 2 words long, but you want to have, remember, it needs to be 4 or less words for shortened work title. And then this points to the bibliography. So in this case, remember, I'm just repeating myself. Notice how the full citation and bibliography are very similar, if almost the same, except for the elements are separated with periods, and in the bibliography you use last name first, not first name first. You use last name first. So it's Jones Wendy. So the author, you have the work title in quotes, you have the website name in italics, you have the publication date or access date or updated date next, and then you have the URL. Everything separated with a period. And that's how you format a website or source citation for a website. So once again, I think I showed this in my last video. For footnotes, so we've been doing source citation, but what do these actually look like? Well, if you're doing footnotes, this is how they would appear. So you would have, here's the text here. I'm not going to read this, but basically you have text, and you can see the footnotes 1, 2, 3, 4. And then at the bottom of the page, you have this short horizontal line, and then you have all the footnotes. And notice how footnote number 1, the first line is indented. It's indented a ½ inch. And then if there's any text that runs over to the next line, it goes to the left margin. Notice how while we use a superscript number in the text, the ones are not superscript, they're actual normal height. But then you would actually put the source citation. So 1 would go here, and notice how there's no space between footnotes. It's just now number 2 comes here. So that's how you would actually find the source citation. So if it was for a book, you have to go format it like a book. It's for a journal, you have to format it like a journal. And then you just put the various sources here. So what about writing a bibliography? Well, a bibliography contains all the works cited in the footnotes and endnotes. So it contains entries on all the sources. It may also contain other consulted works. Each entry contains all the necessary source information. So if we back up, remember a full citation contained all the information, because if you're using that footnoting system, there was no bibliography. So in this case, if you're using a bibliography, everything's going to be a short note, and that short note, maybe we should back up. That short note points to the bibliography. Notice Jones Writing Systems. That's enough to find Jones in the bibliography and the article, the title here. Then you're able to look up all this information, this other information. So if you're writing a bibliography, it contains all the works, consulted works, and each entry, because the footnotes were just short footnotes or shortened citations, which point to the bibliography, and the bibliography entry contains all the necessary source information. So, and it's the author's last name is written first. If you saw those examples, the author's last name was always written first. The source citation of information is separated with periods. I've been pointing that out with all the examples. And you format a bibliography in the following manner. Now, I just went over footnotes on how they're formatting, but the bibliography is formatted a little differently. You alphabetize the works by the author's last name. And when the author has one or more works listed, meaning there's actually more than one work by an author, then you alphabetize works by the work title. So if you had 3 works from Smith, then you would, John Smith, it'd be Smith, John, but you would then would come the work titles, and then you would alphabetize his 3 works by the work title. Of course, you don't include the word if it starts with the word the. You don't use the word the, or don't alphabetize by the word the. And use a 3M dash that looks like this in place of the author's name for all subsequent works by the same author. And there's an example of this on the next slide. So basically, you don't repeat, Smith, John, Smith, John. So it'd be Smith, John. Then the next entry would be, instead of using his last name, would be a 3M dash. And there's an example of this. But basically, subsequent works just use a 3M dash for the author's name. And you begin the first line at the left margin. This is the exact opposite of a footnote. Remember the footnote, you indented a ½ inch. Well, on a bibliography entry, actually the margin, or the first line starts at the margin, and any runover, you indent any runover a ½ inch. So it's basically the opposite of a footnote. And do not use space between entries. So now let's look. I'm pretty sure there's no more bullet. Let's look at it. So here's an example of a bibliography. So here, an example bibliography. Notice how, the works are listed alphabetically by author. Now don't worry about all the various. These look to be all books, but the main thing is you have the author's names are alphabetized by author, and then notice that the entries all start at the left margin, and then any run over, meaning the second, third, fourth line, is indented a ½ inch. Remember, that's the exact opposite of a footnote. And then when you have a repeated, so here, these are actually 3 books written by me. So when you have multiple entries by the same author, then you actually alphabetize by the title of the work, which these are. So the court, remember, you don't use alphabetize by the, so it's court, essential. And then instead of repeating the author's last name, so you don't repeat Wick, Kenneth, Wick, Kenneth, Wick, Kenneth, what you do is that you just use a 3M dash. This means that this 3M dash here actually means it's the same author here. It's the same author here. So that's it for this video. If you want to get notifications for this series, please click subscribe. If you like the video, please click like, and check out links to books and videos in the description.